everyone, and welcome to our live review for Eternal Strands. It is an action RPG that has been created by former all-star developers. You may remember Mark Laidlaw from BioWare. This is his new studio and one of his first games, but he's also brought along some all-star talent from other big development teams to make this game. It is an indie game, but I think I'd probably describe it as like a AA game instead of a AAA game. It doesn't have a lot of the money and resources behind it that you get from like a God of War or something like that, but I do feel like they've done a pretty good job of making a great game with the resources that they had. Alongside me to discuss that, of course, is Matt Keil. What's up, Matt?
Hello.
How you feeling about this live review format that we got going? This is our second one.
I mean, it's not that different from what we did on GameFace before, just better quality footage.
Yeah, our conversations are the same, but the wrapper that's put around it is a lot different. I think a lot better. So I'm also in 2K, by the way. 4K, but it's really 2K. Like it's being up-res by YouTube to 4K, but everything's recorded and published basically and rendered in 2K. I think that's been a huge great upgrade for us as well. So anyway...
Upgrade for the game footage. I don't know if you need to see us in 2K.
At our age, it's probably not good to see us in 4K. I'd agree with that. So anyway, we're talking about Eternal Strands today. Matt, how much time did you have to play this?
Probably like 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
2 or 3 hours. I installed it back when it came out last week, and then I just didn't get to it until you mentioned it yesterday. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll play that tonight.
I've got about 8 or 9 hours in at this point. Well, let's get going. Let's talk about the story in Eternal Strands. I will admit, Matt, it was a little difficult for me to follow what was going on here.
See, that's interesting because I already knew everything it was doing so early that I was just jumping through dialogue.
Oh, really?
I was like, yeah, I get it. Okay, the magic went wrong. You covered a whole city, disappeared, and we found a way into the city. Okay, and now we're gonna run into this. Oh, yeah, I now the whole game's exploring the city that's been cut off for half a century. I get it. Okay, I'm. Get me to the magic combat. Get me to the physics spells. That's what I'm here for.
Well, there is a plot. You play as a girl named Bryn.
Yeah, it's not a bad plot. It's just very by the numbers fantasy.
So what do you think happened there at the beginning? They're trying to access this place.
They're trying to access the Enclave, which was the heart of all magic and like kind of the elite of this magic like driven world. And 50 years ago, something happened, some cataclysm or something happened where all magic went wrong, and that Enclave got sealed off from the world by what's called the Veil, which is this giant like magic basically force field that prevents anyone from getting near it because it creates this stuff called the Tangle, which is like this very pretty but very deadly kind of half smoke, half vine sort of stuff.
It's like toxic
fog.
If
it touches you, it like basically hurts and kills you. But there are still people who can use magic in the world. They're called weavers, and they're kind of social outcasts because people are afraid of magic because of what happened 50 years ago. Bryn is a weaver, and she's been with certain weaver bands which go around and sort of like do various things, but she's been with a kind of disorganized one. She's joined up with this new one, which is run by this bird person whose name I can't remember, but her name starts with O. It's like Aurea or something like that.
Aurea or something like that. Yeah.
And she is actually really good. Like this band is actually has a plan. Aurea knows some things.
What is the plan, though? I never could figure out what they're trying to do.
The plan is to get in there and get close to the Veil and figure out what happened, because no one knows what happened.
So they want to go. They want to go in there and meet the people who are there.
Not quite. They don't think that's what's going to happen, but because what happens is these Weaver bands do this thing where they're basically explorers, and they go to try to find resources or new magical sources or magical spells, which are called threads. Because there's a whole sewing, weaving thing
motif that's going on. Yeah.
The point goes out and is like the person out in the field, and then they have back at the base at the camp they have like this loom. Literally looks like a threaded loom, and they can basically watch what the point is doing and communicate as though you have an earpiece. You have a magic radio earpiece.
It was a very elaborate way to come up with a way to give you an earpiece.
It's a way to keep having the different characters in the game talking to you and have conversations while you are out running around doing it.
And have it make some semblance of sense.
Make some sense in a pre-industrial magic civilization. They send you out to kind of figure out what's going on. You find what's called an arc, which is like a magic android, basically powered by magic that haven't worked for 50 years.
Yeah.
Like it's been 50 years. Bryn's like probably 22 or something. Like Bryn doesn't. Most of these characters do not remember a time when magic was part of the world in a functional way before this. The cataclysm was long enough ago that most of these characters do not remember the world before.
Right.
And she finds sort of an arc that and the two anomalies where she's out there. She finds that, and she finds a drake.
A dragon, basically. Yeah.
Who is running around and apparently is in rutting season, so not very territorial, very aggressive, keeps harassing her, and right as this is about to kill her, the arc reactivates because of her magic near it, and puts up an impenetrable force field and starts just sort of walking away. So she follows it to stay inside the force field.
And it protects her.
And the threads, the tangle, starts to encroach on the camp. So Aurea says, everybody pack up and get to Bryn.
Yeah.
Because she realizes that the force field
safe zone.
is going to help them. So they run towards Bryn. Aurea gets her
pack
arm
up their whole
hurt.
camp in 2
as
seconds.
fast as they can. They leave a bunch of stuff behind, which gives you the excuse to have to rebuild the camp when you get to where you're going.
Yeah.
Aurea does get her arm hurt because she saves one of the other characters and gets stuck in the tangle. And they basically follow where the arc is taking them with their impenetrable force field, and it happens to take them through the veil and into the interior of the Enclave, which no one has seen in 50 years.
Which is where they wanted to go.
Which is ideal. Yeah, they would never have dreamed.
It all worked out.
No one's ever gotten that close to the veil in 50 years,
right.
so they obviously that was not the goal. But
Yeah.
like, it's better. Like, they're all like, oh my god. The one guy, the Atelier guy, is like, this is the most amazing thing that's ever happened. I can't imagine what all the things. So like, they're explorers. So some of them are excited, some of them are scared.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, you end up in this place no one's been for 50 years. No one knows what happened in there, and so they set up camp and they're like, all right, let's figure out what happened to magic.
Yeah, it's basically your ancestral home, though. It's like where your forefathers lived, right?
Yeah, and a couple of them are from that, and really, it's where all magic was centered. And life isn't very good for a weaver because everybody looks side-eyed at magic people, and that's why they kind of hang out together in these weaver bands anyway. So if they can figure out what happened, maybe fix it or come up with some actual answers, they might improve the quality of life for everybody who can use magic in the world. Like, so, and maybe fix it. Maybe I'm going to assume by the end of this game you have fixed everything and the veil is lifted and magic is back in the world in some form, but probably not exactly perfect because you got to leave room for the sequel.
So do they want to leave? I never understood. Do they want to leave the veil?
I think it
seemed like that was their goal, was to get there.
I think they would eventually like to get out, yes.
Yeah.
But right now, what they can do is explore this place that hasn't been seen in half a century. And like the whole idea of the tutorial expedition that Bryn goes on is to find this tower, this watchtower that they knew was there, to determine how far away from the veil they actually are. But that's when the Drake shows up and ruins everything.
Right.
And they kind of, it's basically the same thing. It's like, we're here to do a very controlled, very dangerous thing. And then everything went wrong and we had to run. And by the time we were done running and weren't in danger anymore, we have ended up in a much weirder place.
Yeah.
So the idea early on is just to explore.
Yeah, and survive.
And when you activate the first loom gate, like some native, either someone who lives there is
Hearthsiders
watching you.
is what they're called. Yeah.
Which is a term that comes out of nowhere.
There are people there. And that's when the story starts to get interesting to me.
So apparently that's
the Hearthsiders.
Apparently, even though no one's been inside the veil for 50 years, they have a word for people who live there, and maybe that's the word that they used before the Cataclysm.
That's my guess. Yeah.
But like that seemed to.
That's when the story started becoming at least a little bit interesting. Because at least then I understood that they're like, hey, we're strangers in a strange land, and oh my god, there's other people here. And that's when it became interesting, figuring out how those people got there, how they've stayed there all this time, what their motivations are they friend or foe? The friend or foe thing goes on for quite a while. You don't really know whether they're trying to help you or hurt you for a long time, because they're kind of skulking around your camp, like spying on you and things like that. That's when the story kind of got interesting to me, but I felt like the base concept of it didn't provide a lot of motivation for me to keep playing.
Characters are well done.
They are.
Like, all the characters are very specific.
The writing's really good. I think the voice acting is pretty good. Yeah.
I mean, it's just, there's only so many ways into a fantasy world. This is at least a little different.
I thought it had seemed a lot of the player. Lots of proper nouns thrown around that I'm like, what are they even talking about? Like, I do feel like they thought that you read like a primer.
If you need details, there is actually a lot of detail in the codex of all those things, because Lane writes in universe. Lane writes all that stuff out. And Lane is very, very precise about things.
I'll be honest with you, I never have to go back and read that stuff in any other game. I went and read it in this game. Yeah. So I think that shows you, though, that it's not explaining as much as most games do,
I disagree with that.
Can be fine. But
I don't agree with that. I think they explain.
But why would I go read a code? I never read that stuff in other games. was.
Well, they'll
face
tell
value
you
things that were happening. I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm like, I went to dig in to try to figure out if I could find the motivation in the codex, and it didn't. It just recapped everything that had happened in the cinematics. There was no extra like information.
Right, because that is the information. I don't know.
Right, and I don't think it's enough. That's my point.
I don't know what you're looking for.
I'm just giving my perspective on it. I thought the story is a good premise. It's fine, but it didn't wrap me up and make me care about what was going to happen or really care about what was going to happen to the characters after that, I guess is the best way I can put it. Like, I felt like it did a poor job of making me care.
I 100% disagree.
Okay. Well, that's what this is great for. So let's talk about the score for story then. I'm thinking like a 5 or a 6.
I, like, off the basis of what I've seen so far, I would say 7. I could go up or down based on what the revelations about what actually happened in there are. You know, if I think the truth about what happened inside the Enclave is dumb, then that would probably drop. But right now, it's just a big mystery. It's just like, okay, we want to know what happened here. Eventually, I assume we're going to find out what happened there, and that may or may not be a disappointment. So I don't know.
Okay, so I guess we'll just meet in the middle with a 6 on the story.
I guess.
All right, next up is options, which is basically the game design, all the systems in the game, the weapons that you get, the level design, things like that. In our old game trailers reviews, it was called design instead of options, but over time, that's all kind of changed with games as a service and things like that. So we've already talked a little bit when we discussed the story about how you have a home base. And basically how the design works is you have this home base that you go back to in between missions, and you're upgrading all the different stations. You have a shop, you have a blacksmith, you have a magic place, and what's the fourth one?
Lane.
Yeah, I guess.
Lane's they. Lane's
right.
non-binary, which they actually present very subtly.
I missed that, actually.
But Lane does mostly codex stuff, but also the elemental potions.
You bring stuff back to her, and she adds it to the codex.
They do the elemental potions.
Right.
When you first upgrade, you get the fire resistance and cold resistance.
They go on your belt, and then you get one per
each.
mission.
Yeah. And then as you upgrade, I think you probably just get more.
And you can upgrade all those stations, so eventually you upgrade the shop. That gives you more inventory, like 2 more at a time, which I was like, thanks.
It's 3 at a time.
Is it 3 at a time?
You start at 12, you go to 15, then you go to 18.
Yeah.
And I assume, you can see the locked
slots.
You're just like, it'll be great when I'm about there, Because you can only carry one of each kind of item, and then you can carry a stack of pretty much. I don't think I've run out of room in a stack. I had like 50 iron at one point.
Yeah.
But basically, if you have to choose what to drop, and usually there's rarer and less rare items, so you probably want to drop your if you've got a bunch of 1-star fur, you probably want to drop it to get the the 3-star steel or whatever, because you're gonna be able to make. Because basically when you reforge or craft things, you need a kind of item. You have like forged or tanned or like different types, fabric or fur or bone or
they need to be at a certain quality.
But the different qualities you choose will up the stats of the item beyond what it would normally be at base. So it's important to have the right quality and right type of item.
And you're talking about the blacksmith.
The blacksmith is that is the most intricate crafting system by far.
It is. I was a little confused by it at first, honestly. I was like, wait a minute, you're asking for red iron. I have 12 of those. And I was like hitting red iron, and it wasn't like sending the red iron into like the recipe. And I was like, what's going on? And then I just started clicking around, and I realized what you didn't need exactly the red iron. You need something in that class, so to speak. And I started selecting other things. I'm like, oh, I get it now. I thought that was a little obtuse and kind of...
Well, the problem I had with that was the first time I came back from the first mission, I'm like, oh, I can upgrade one of my things now. So I did that. And then I went through the tutorial of how to upgrade the thing.
That happened to you too?
And I already had used
all your stuff.
Used all my stuff.
I did the same thing.
I'll just make a shitty version of this, and that'll call it.
That was a huge mistake in that game.
They shouldn't have let you do
exactly.
that.
The same thing happened to me. I went back. I'm like, I have stuff. I can go upgrade. I upgrade. Then the story stuff happens, and it's like, now go upgrade. And I had used the resources I needed.
Well, especially because the story says, now you can go upgrade your sword. So I went and upgraded my sword.
I did the same thing.
But it turned out you had to go back and talk to somebody else who'd then tell you to go upgrade your sword, and then you had to select that in the quest log and then go do the thing.
It didn't realize I had already upgraded. And you kind of mentioned this earlier, but as you go out and you collect a bunch of junk after you kill enemies or break boxes or whatever, you come back, you go to the shop, and she can convert all that stuff into the camp supplies that you need to upgrade the 4 different stations. And the stations are gated. Like, you have to wait. You can't just say, oh my god, I got all these resources.
Yeah. You only get one upgrade of each one until it says you have to wait.
Until the story tells you that it's time to do it again.
Which is fine, because otherwise you'd be like overpowering everything.
Yeah, you'd be OP.
You are not weak, really, in this game. I've not found I've had to really stay on top of the armor upgrades too much. No. I haven't even felt the need to craft a helmet for myself yet.
So the armor, you have a helm, you have your chest armor, bracers, and greaves. You hardly ever get new stuff.
Yeah, it's very... I mean, you have to get recipes for it, but I've only found like 2.
Yeah, like it doesn't pile on the gear like you get in a lot of games like this. And again, back to the design. So you have the hub world where you go back and upgrade all your stuff and upgrade the shop and all that. And you have a little tent with an inventory spot and everything. But then when you go out, it's not like you go out into this open world. Like, you go to the edge of your safe space, and you hit a button, and then it basically just loads in the zone that you're going to play in.
Yeah, it's like Fable 1.
Yeah.
Is what it reminds me of. The areas are bigger than Fable 1, but it is that sort of broken up map chunk sort of thing.
Yep. And, like, if you die, like, you can only take 3 things with you. And then one of the things that sorceress does back at the camp is gives you extra things to bring back. So at first you can only bring back 3, but then you upgrade it, you can bring back 4, and then you upgrade it, you can bring back 5. But bottom line is, if you die out there, you're going to be pissed because there's definitely going to be stuff in your inventory that you're upset that you're not going to be able to take back with you.
Also, if you die out there, what are you doing? Because you health abilities, is everywhere. Potions are everywhere.
Yeah.
And a vitality potion fills your health completely, no matter how little you have. So.
And then as far as quests are concerned, you have main story quests, there are companion quests, and then epic hunt quests. And the epic hunt quest is where you just go out and fight the Colossi. We haven't talked about how the fact that this game has like these elements of Shadow of the Colossus in it yet. But that is a big part of the game, and you go out and you hunt those. So you have basically 3 different mission types, which is fine. Like, I don't need more than that in a game, honestly.
You learn new spells from the Colossi, basically.
Yeah, that's basically what it comes down to.
Fine.
Yeah. And that's pretty much it for the design. Like, you go out, you go through missions, either you die or you complete the mission and you come back. Sometimes they'll set up, like, a shortcut for you to get back to camp, but eventually, like, all the looms end up becoming fast travel points. And the other point, too, is that when you die, once you have set up the looms as fast travel points, you don't go back to camp when you die. You respawn at your last loom that you spawned from. So I think overall it does a pretty good job. There's not a lot of, like, extras in this. It really kind of cuts the action RPG formula to the bone, but I think that's okay.
Yeah. It gives you enough.
Yeah. Like, and I never felt like I was like, I need more systems. Like,
no, it reminds me of, like, Immortal Phoenix Rising was to the kind of the Assassin's Creed formula.
Yeah.
It's like, for the open world formula. It's like, we're gonna dial all this back to like kind of the core of what all this is, just enough so that it's still fun without like loading you up with a bunch of extra nonsense. You never really feel like you wasted a trip.
No.
You always come back with something that you can use to even if
it's only 3.
Even if it's just to throw some random resources in, so you're that much closer to upgrading
some station.
the station or something. That's fine.
Yeah, I hear you. Yep, I agree. I'm saying options of 7.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to interaction/gameplay. This is a hack and slash action RPG for the most part, but you do have magic. So playing this game, I compare it to like Breath of the Wild and like Tears of the Kingdom, because you have like, you can climb on anything, and you have this stamina meter, so you have to figure out, am I going to be able to climb that face before I run out of my meter? And then you have the first spell you have is this kinetic spell that lets you pick up stuff basically with your mind and move it around and throw it. You can use it as a weapon.
Right.
Puzzle solving.
Well, I'm comparing it to Immortal Phoenix Rising because Immortal Phoenix Rising is all that too.
Actually, you're right.
But it's vastly simplistic.
You're right.
Simplistic. It's not nearly as, freeform as Zelda is.
Yeah.
And this feels more like boiling down kind of Zelda's ideas into like what Phoenix Rising did. It boils it down into something that's a little more digestible in an action RPG context.
Yeah.
Right down to the interact. The other thing it reminds me of is what is that? Now I forgot that. PsyOps.
The Mind Gate Conspiracy? Yeah. You can move stuff with your mind.
Because you move things around. It's very physics-based. You start with kinetic, and then you get ice pretty soon.
Yeah, you get the ice.
In the tutorial, and then I imagine
Frost
you get
powers.
fire.
The ice beam, which I've found to be very cool. but also very awkward to use.
Yeah, it's not... You're like, oh, cool. But it's like, man, you only freeze enemies if you kind of like come to a strange agreement with a physics system.
Yeah.
And then you go up and hit them, and you're taking damage from your own ice, and it's just like, what is this? Like, I don't.
Also,
because I find the kinetics, the starting kinetic ability to be basically useless.
You can pick up stuff and throw it at enemies.
You can, but it's so
but it's
slow.
Like, it's slow
and it's not very powerful
and clunky. And it doesn't feel like it always throws the stuff where your reticle is.
No, not always. And especially, I mean, if you want to reliably hit an enemy with that, you have to lock on, and even then, I'll give you like an 80-20 on that, you know.
Well, then there's parts where they'll put you and they're like, here's like a burning forest. Use your ice ray to walk across the fires or whatever. You do it, and then you're like walking across, but then you're freezing to death because you're standing on the ice. It
even says in the description, it's like, this spells good if you want to make a bridge. I'm like, a bridge that burns my feet off with a frostbite. Like, what do you?
I know.
I mean, it's not like it's damages you a lot. But it's like there's a point where it doesn't feel good. You know,
this game definitely, the gameplay in general does feel a little janky. In pretty much every regard.
Definitely jank. Not in a bad way. When I was playing this, I kept feeling like it feels like obviously, I think both of us have independently invoked Breath of the Wild in terms of like its influence. So I'm not saying in that. But playing this feels like playing a 360 game.
Yeah.
And I don't really mean that as an insult, because I do find it kind of charming.
Well, this is like a AAA game from like 2008.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And like, I don't have a problem with that. Like, I find it kind of charming and pleasant in that regard. But it has the thing that a game, if you made this in like 2008, 2009, I think you'd have that exact problem of like, I see what you want these spells to do when they interact with each other as a freeform system in the world. It's just not quite there. Like when things are on fire, there's two elements that make it on fire. There's the fire animation, but there's also the orange lighting that indicates
also will
fire
burn
area,
you.
which also burn. So when is it not on fire?
Right.
When it's on fire, or when it's also just sort of lit like a Kiss concert? Like, which is it? You know,
it's
like,
also frustrating too when like sometimes the world just accidentally catches on fire.
Yes.
And you kind of get trapped. Yeah. And you're waiting for the fire to die down, but you can't figure out when it dies.
Right, because that's a cool emergent moment. It's like, oh, I threw this thing at him and I missed, so it set that on fire. So now we're fighting in the fire, and I pushed him into the fire and it burned him and killed him. But now
I'm stuck.
Yeah, I'm stuck. Also, you get you can get different and sometimes better drops from enemies if you burn them or kill them in certain ways.
Depending on how you kill them.
Like they'll be forged or like you know, like whatever, tan leather comes out of the fire. Sure, why the fuck not? But like now, I'm like, well, now I can't get it because it's on fire, and then if I freeze it, I still can't get it because then the ice will damage me.
Right.
And now I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like what do I do to not hurt myself trying to pick up the thing? And so like I love what they're trying to do. I don't think it's quite there to the point that I feel like I'm supposed to be using the magic way more in combat, and I don't.
I don't either. I use the sword and shield way more.
Sword and shield.
And if you all the game for the marketing, it's like a magical combat, whatever.
Right, exactly. I thought it was going to be like combining this and that.
I'm a weaver, right?
Now the fireball is also frozen.
No, I'm just going to hack. I'm going to block.
I'm going to block. I'm going to, and then, but even that, I mean, you really got to be locked on and
that feels
facing
loosey-goosey too. Yeah.
To block, especially the parry. The parry window's pretty wide, but you got to be locked on pretty much. And the other thing is like, so if you block like a projectile, like early on you run into these like the magic androids that shoot crossbow bolts at you, and pretty much hitting the block at any time deflects it.
Yeah.
But you can deflect them back at the enemy.
What I hate is how the enemies, when you hit them the first time, they run
away.
Run away.
It's like, hey, you fucker, get back here! Like
they keep running away. I think I'm just chasing them, trying to get a
Well, I know that's what you're supposed to use the ice for,
right?
But I find it so annoying to take
use
damage
the ice.
to be hit while I'm hitting them while they're frozen in the ice, and it was like, there's no way to win.
But I understand why they kept the ice and stuff in there. Like, I know that they know it's janky like we do, but it's worth it still because it is cool, and every once in a while it does some weird emergent thing where you're like,
does
oh,
serve
okay.
a purpose.
Yeah,
it has definite uses.
So for me, interaction, I'm going to give it a 4. I think it's below average. It could get better, but I think the stage it's in right now, I don't play a lot of games that are like this anymore, where I feel like the gameplay is not up to scratch. It feels like a solved problem that this game has not solved.
I think this is fine, and it could have been great. And I just don't think it's getting there, and it's weird to me that, in a sense, this is a solved problem from When was
2
PSYOP?
decades
When was
ago.
PSYOP? Like 2008? Was
No, it was like 2003.
Oh, no, because that was on original Xbox,
Yeah, it was
wasn't
like 2003
So,
maybe.
That was like our first year here,
Yeah.
right? That was like 2004, 2005.
Right. Next up, we're going to talk about the visuals in this game. A lot of times with smaller games like this, it's kind of the thing that sets it apart. But I'll be honest, like, this game looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you find games like this that have a smaller budget, they'll skimp on the cinematics. And this game does do that a little bit, but also, like, the big moments in this game, there are full-on animated voice cinematics. Like,
I do think they look pretty different from the in-engine stuff, but
Yeah.
it works. Like,
Yeah, you can
I
tell
like
that
the
they're-
animation style.
yeah. Do you like the art style?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the art style in the cinematics more than I like the art style in the actual game. It reminds me of the old the cutscenes from Myth, the Bungie game back in the day. It reminds me of the cutscenes that you'd see in 90s adventure games where you're like, wow, I can't believe they actually animated this.
Yeah.
It's a nice little... I mean, again, I don't want to keep harping on the idea that this feels like an old game, but it does remind me of classic games more.
Yeah,
than it does.
it's pretty low poly.
It can be.
Yeah.
The areas are bigger, the frame rate's better. But again, I don't mean to insult it when I say it feels 360-ish, but it does kind of feel
I agree with that.
360-ish.
Yeah, it does feel like a game that came out in the late aughts.
And I kind
essentially.
of appreciate it in the way that, like, maybe some people who didn't hate everything that was on the PS1's the vibrating polygon one, like that sort of polygon trash throw, but whatever. I'm sure there's an actual word for that art style. But, like, for me, this is, like, I guess it's kind of like the Xbox 360 generation equivalent of, like, pixel art, like Owlboy to the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
You know, sort of like we took that aesthetic and that sort of the design idea and kind of bumped it up to modern standards in some ways. Like, they didn't go super, beyond. I mean, obviously you're not going to confuse the environments in this game with, like, God of War Ragnarok, but, like, some of that's, I bet, with minus the particle effects and some of the physics stuff, you could make these maps fit onto a 360 game.
Yeah. The worlds are small.
Yeah.
As far as virtual mileage are concerned, like the instances that you go out into, like, you don't go all that far before you get to the end and it's time to come back.
I admit, like, you do have a map and it tells you
The
where
map,
you're going.
I should have mentioned this in options. The map, I wish, was a little more, like, elaborate.
The map is not
it's like a rough
helpful.
idea.
It'll tell you which direction to go to get to the place, the name on the place. It's probably about as big as they can be without having to give you some kind of mounted transportation to cover distances, or maybe a more granular fast travel system.
Or the worlds are as big as whatever engine they used will allow a world to be without having to write to the metal.
No,
that would be my guess.
I'm pretty sure they could be. I don't know what this is running on.
I don't either, actually.
But I'm sure whatever it is could do bigger environments.
I mean, I think if you write to the metal, it will. But I think this game in particular is a case where the studio is like, whatever the engine gives us, we're going to build our world around that, because we don't want to end up spending like 2 years trying to write our own graphics engine inside Unreal Engine 5 or the Source Engine.
It's Unreal Engine 5.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they probably used the base levels of whatever that is and didn't do a whole lot of like hand coding on Unreal Engine 5 to get it where they wanted. And ultimately, that's fine.
It doesn't have the fucking hitching problem.
That's true. Did you see that today, by the way?
Maybe that's what limits the size of it. Maybe. It's because the hitching.
If you go over that limit,
the hitching problem does seem to happen when you're loading in new. You're streaming terrain, basically.
Yeah.
So maybe this is as big as it gets without having to do that.
The hitch
maybe
problem.
That's what
It's
that
possible. I mean, they could definitely have got more out of Unreal Engine 5 than they did for this game. And I don't think it's that, like, maybe it was a skill. I don't think it's like a skill issue or anything like that. I think it's like a time and budget issue. It is a style.
I think it's more the texturing gives it like a animated cartoon look to it.
The texturing's a little washed out.
The textures definitely have a choice to them.
I mean, it's maybe on purpose, but
Some of it.
It makes it look a little like Breath of the Wild, honestly.
In my head, I mean, obviously we don't have the B-roll.
It looks like it's running on Switch.
We don't have the B-roll. I mean, the characters, like, they're very detailed. Their outfits are pretty detailed.
Animation's good.
Animation's good.
Okay, well, my score for graphics, it's tough. This is a hard score.
It's tough because I don't think technically it's a very impressive graphical game.
Yeah.
But I do really like the aesthetic of it.
Yeah.
I really like the design of it. I would watch this animated cartoon.
And then when you talk about graphics, you start thinking about like the games that look the best, and you often forget about like, hey, there's all these Japanese games that come out that actually look worse than this game. And so I'm kind of finding myself somewhere in the middle on this with graphics. Like I think a 5 is probably where I'm gonna put it, because I think technically it's below average, but aesthetically above average, which gets me in the middle at like a 5 somehow.
I don't know. I go back and forth. Like, I want to give it more of a 6 because I do like the aesthetics.
It feels like there's just as many detriments as positives, and that's where I landed.
Again, I feel like I'd be willing to bump that up if, like, this went through, like, a round of patches that really tightened all those seams up.
But we can't assume it'll happen. We got to review what's there now. So I'm going to go with the 5 for graphics. All right. Next up, what I think is the strongest part of this game, which is the sound. So I talk about this all the time. I play games without music all the time because I need it to edit with the footage. When you have music, it causes like it makes it hard to edit with. So I always play when I'm capturing without any music on. Then when I go back out to the living room, I turn the music back on to get the full experience or whatever. But what it allows me to do is to hear more clearly the audio design in games. Because the music isn't overpowering anything. You hear every little sound effect. And like a lot of Japanese games, like if there's no music, there's nothing. Maybe there's like a footstep.
Oh, there's always footsteps.
There's like a footstep or there's like a and stuff like that. But there's never like ambient sound in Japanese games. I don't know why. The audio in this game is incredible. Turn down the music just for like 40 minutes and play this game without it. It is awesome. The ambient sound, the sound effects out in the world, all the creatures and the enemies, everything makes a sound. It's incredible. Like for a game with this kind of a budget, it literally has audio of games like 20 times the budget. I'm not exaggerating.
You think we might find another arc that could...
Or possibly repair this one?
The other cool thing that I found was like, so like you, I toppled the first boss. I went back out into the world and I'm like running around. And again, I had the music down so I can hear every sound effect. And I start hearing this. Boom.
Oh, yeah, I am.
Boom. Boom. And I'm like, what is that? And I start running around. Like I go this way, it gets quieter. I run the other way, it gets louder. And I get closer. It's boom, boom, boom. My subwoofer starts kicking. And I'm like, what in the hell is that? I come around a tree and there is a freaking Colossus walking around in the world. And it was the same one that I had just fought. And as you mentioned earlier, you fight him again. A little more challenging, still not very challenging. But like, games like this do not have audio like this. Like, they just don't. Like, they'll have, like, one ambient sound in the scene and music, and that's it. But I didn't know if it was the Drake, if it was another Colossus, like the next Colossus I was supposed to fight. And I was like, oh, man. And then I started seeking it out. Like, that's great audio design. That's great game design, all coming together in a special moment, at least for me in this game. Like, I was like, wow.
I did appreciate, and I could see him when I came around the corner. I saw him walking by, kind of down. You know, his head was above the rest of the level of the area.
Music is great too, by the way.
Music's good.
Yeah.
Like it's good. But like, yeah, I wonder. Like hearing you say that, I wonder if the sound is sort of the glimpse into what this could be.
Yeah.
You know,
surround sounds great too. Like I would just stand still and just pay attention to the sound tracking and spin the camera around and things like that. That's all freaking great as well. Again, this is stuff you don't see or hear in games of this budget level usually. I'm going sound 8. Any objection to that?
No. I mean, I admit I didn't notice it as much as you did, but I didn't listen to it through the system you listened to. So.
Next up, progression. How the game gates things, how you make progression through the game, leveling up, stuff like that.
Feels slow.
It does feel, in general, it does feel slow. I agree. Just in general, it does feel slow.
Like, I don't mind the grind because I do enjoy sort of the gathering resources, bringing it back, slowly upgrading things. And you can, I mean, the fact that you can convert anything into a generic resource to upgrade the stations, which is probably the most annoying gating method that, like, camp-related games have, where I'm like, I have to upgrade this thing to this to survive this area, but I can't do that until I upgrade this station, but I need 3 more woolen foozles to do it, which means I got to go back to this other area and kill these guys until they decide to be nice enough to drop 5 of them. And in this case, it's like, here's a bunch of like generic rock that I'm never going to use. Turn it into these things and upgrade that asshole station. Like way better. Like I do prefer that. That's a good solution to that. But I still feel like it's going pretty slow.
Yeah.
And I know some of it's gated by the story, but like even just trying to upgrade the armor feels like every time I get back, I'm like, oh, maybe I can upgrade the armor. It's like, no, I don't have this, and I need that, and I could use this, but I only
need
have
it for
5
something
of
else.
it, and I might need it for something else, and if I apply it to this, I'm actually going to lose 5 points on the fire resistance, so I don't really want to use it for that. So I kind of just sort of backed
You're
away
paralyzed
from the
by
blacksmith
fear.
and didn't do anything. You know?
Yep.
So yeah, that's my experience in progression. Is
The crafting too.
I'm
it's
only
like,
2 hours in, so it's not
Yeah.
like I'm really seeing a lot of it, but like that's how it feels early on.
Well, maybe I'm spoiled at this point from playing so many other games, but having to go back to home base to craft now feels archaic.
A little bit.
Like, there should be crafting stations out there. There should be some place where you could just go into a menu and craft, but they make you go back. And I do think that also makes the progression feel really slow and sluggish.
And I know, like, you know, you've set it up so all the other characters are the ones who craft these things, so I get it. You have to talk to them and go to their station for that. And then you come back with the thing for the loom gate, and they're like, you go rest in your tent. We're going to all go to the loom gate and fix it. And I'm like, so you can go out there. You just don't fucking want
You
to.
don't want to. Yeah. I know you said you didn't die at all. I did
Go
die
team.
a couple times. I thought generally the enemies levels were pretty well balanced. Like, I felt like they gave me a decent challenge here and there.
Yeah, like I said,
It wasn't a cakewalk.
Like I said in the show, in the GameFace show about, like, we were talking about, what was it, the first Berserker.
Yeah.
It's like, this does have that feeling of like, I don't feel like I'm 100% in control of everything the character's doing in terms of like where I'm facing or when I'm going to block something properly. But if it doesn't work, I lose like a little bit. You know, I don't ever feel like I've gotten completely screwed and I can't succeed now because of that. The consequences are much lower stakes, but it does get annoying. But you know, but luckily it's just like go hit the glowing bags until they give you another potion.
Well, I think the other thing that halts the progression is what we talked about earlier about how if you die, you can only keep 3 things. And you don't die that often in the game, but still when you do, like, you can only keep 3 things. And so all that stuff that you've collected, you have to collect it all over again.
Well, it's like you're gonna keep 4 things if you upgrade the station.
And then 5, but it's still not much.
No,
because you have my inventory has like 21 slots or whatever.
But it is usually the most important stuff.
Yeah.
I get it. You can't. So you can't. It's not still there when you come back, right?
I've never
It's
seen
not
a
like
pickup
Dark
on the
Souls.
ground. Yeah, I've never seen something where I pick it up and get it back.
Start with 3 health potions that get refilled every time you go back to camp. And so it's like the Estus flask, and I assume you get to carry more of those.
Right.
Maybe you get to take back the things that only mattered, and all that's left is a bunch of 1-star rarity stuff. It doesn't matter. Like, whatever.
Yep. So anyway, I do feel like that stunts progression a little bit, but generally, like, this is just your typical rank and file action RPG.
I feel like I've progressed in my spells pretty well. I feel like I've progressed in my station upgrades pretty well. Really, the place progression feels slow is equipment.
Yeah, I agree.
I just don't feel like and it sounds like it
doesn't
really
change.
change.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That is the biggest issue with progression. But generally, like, I don't complain that much. Like, I feel like they've tuned the difficulty to match the other elements of the game.
Yeah, even if there's no concrete upgrade available at the time, I do always feel like I've done something when I bring stuff back to the camp, so it's not that bad.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, I stop in and check in the blacksmith, and I'm just like, "There's nothing here. Like, I can't.
There's
do
a lot,
anything.
but I can't do anything.
Yeah,
there's all these menus and all this stuff, but like I can't do anything of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But still, I think generally it's pretty good. I give progression like a 7.
Yeah.
Let's move on to value. This is an action RPG. You can kind of shape how you play. We talked earlier about some of the dialogue options. I don't feel like they actually change the game all that much in the long term, but in the short term they do.
It makes a difference in the conversation, which is fine. It's you know, there's a
But it's not like it's
satisfaction
going
to
to
it.
alter the story path in some other way that would make you want to replay the game.
No,
is
you're
what
not
I'm
going to
getting
get
at.
a different ending or anything, I
Yeah.
don't think, based on how you behave in the game.
Now, both you and I have been playing it like a hack and slash, mostly using our sword and board, but they marketed it and every channel, it's a magic fighting game or whatever. I do feel like you can play the game more than one way.
Yeah.
You can play it like we're playing it, or I think you could get good at the Magic and you could play through it as a Magic caster.
Yeah, I don't find the Magic reliable enough to do that. Like that's and I feel like it wants to be.
That's like
I feel
the
like
pro
they
run.
like it to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like it could be if they patch it up or something, tweak it a bit. But it's vastly safer and more efficient to just use the
I feel like I hurt myself as much as I hurt the enemies with the Magic. That's the crazy part.
And I think it's notable that there's another thing we haven't even mentioned yet.
What?
You have a bow and arrow.
Right.
Which I used once in the tutorial and
never
never
used
did
it
it again. Because it's fucking terrible.
So weak. Maybe eventually you can power that up and then you can be a ranged
upgrade
character.
it in the you can upgrade it in the
I mean, my point is like maybe it finally gets powerful enough that you feel okay using it. I don't know. But you're right. That is a third way that you could conceivably play through the game. The game, I mean, I haven't finished the game, but based upon like how many slots I have left and how much I've played already, my guess is it's probably around a 15 to 18 hour game roughly. And if you can play that 2 or 3 times using the different weapons, if you want to go on a magic run or use a ranged like bow run or whatever, you can conceivably play it several times. You're not going to get different plot options. You're not going to change who you're romancing. Like a lot of the other stuff that you get in modern action RPGs, big budget action RPGs, they're not there. But conceivably, there's replay value there that you can play the game multiple times and have a different experience each time. So
main story 12 hours, main plus extras 20 hours.
Yep. It's right around what I thought.
About what it felt like. Also about what that gameplay could sustain.
Yep.
I would think.
Any longer than that would be too long. So for $40, an action RPG that's 15, 20-ish hours long that you could probably play a couple different times and get some more value out of it. I think that's pretty fair for $40. I mean, we've had other indie games for $40 that is just like very linear and you finish in 4 or 5 hours. And obviously we punish games for that. But here, I think the price is right. I think $40 for what you're getting there, I think that's pretty good.
$40 is fair, especially if they improve it a bit.
Yeah. For $40, 15 to 20 hour game, I think that's a 7 for value.
Some people are going to bounce off this because they think it's too primitive, I think.
Yeah. People who only play big budget games, some of them will bounce for sure. Because there's easy analogs to compare it to there. And action RPG is the most popular genre in the industry. Everybody plays them. Everybody has that frame of reference to compare this to. So, maybe 7's a little high for value. Maybe 6 is better.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, so it's time to tally up the scores after we added them all up and we have the average. And we do want to say here, don't take our average score and then go say, oh, but IGN gave it a 9. That's not what we're doing here. We're just giving you a frame of reference for each game that we evaluate here. I think the better thing you should do is look at the individual component scores and figure out yourself what matters to you the most. That's not technically our score. It's just a frame of reference. And so after averaging out the scores, the average for this game is a 6, just below a 6.3. Think higher or lower on the typical review scale? I actually think that one maybe came in about right.
Metacritic 68.
Yeah.
So it's not super far off. I would probably, unless this thing really jumps off a cliff, I'd probably be closer to a 7.5.
Oh, really?
I like it. I enjoy it, despite its flaws.
I actually feel like a 6.3 is probably right around where I would have come in on like the 7 to 10 scale. I think that's probably what I would have given it on like Game Trailer's old review score system or whatever. To me, it's slightly above average. It does some cool stuff, but there's certain things that are below average.
I think on the old X-Play 5-pointer, I would say like I would have expected the reviewer to give it a 3.
Really? I would say a 2. I don't know if I could call this a good game. It's close.
I think it's good. I like it.
I've enjoyed it.
Again, I'm not gonna.
I won't play more of it though.
I will.
You will? I won't. I'm done. I'm good.
I'm gonna go at least until I find out what the hell the actual mystery is.
All right.
And then,
fair enough.
Depending on how much that pisses me off, we'll see if I keep playing. 68 feels kind of harsh from the
other critics.
7 to 9
I'm surprised
scale.
to hear that that's his Metacritic. Actually, I thought it would be higher than that for sure. Yeah.
Same. I accidentally just saw that while I was trying to search for the price.
Yeah.
But. Yeah, I thought we were sitting here really kind of lowballing the thing, and it turns out we were
actually highballing it.
Yeah,
I tried to bring the scores down a couple points, though. Like, there's a couple. I was always the lower on some of the components. You're always the higher on those. So I tried to bring it down a little bit, but I think we ended up in a good place here with the component scores. The average, who cares what that is? But ultimately, I think our components are pretty solid. And I agree with you. I am surprised this Metacritic isn't higher. I'd be interested to read those reviews and see what they're saying about it. that's different from what we're saying. Or maybe they just don't place as much value in the things that we do. That's all a part of reviewing games as well. So anyway, ultimately, we come out at a 6.3 here with SIFTD's live review for Eternal Strands.